Next, we're going to have Director Sara Pauley speak with us. Sara, welcome up.
Well, good afternoon. It is fantastic to join you all this afternoon, and really appreciate, Kenny, the invitation, Lee, Stacy. Really appreciate just an opportunity to visit with you all a little bit this afternoon. Justin, you did a great job, and it's you can tell by Justin's passion why he's in that role and why he's making a difference. So thank you, sir, for what you do for the department. Very grateful for that. I wondered as I pulled up, Scott, my husband Scott's back there with me today, and we pulled right in next to an NBC vehicle, and I was like, I wonder who's here this afternoon. And sure enough, makes sense that Justin would be. But it is, Lee, you said it well, it's so wonderful to finally be connecting with people in person again. Scott and I actually came up yesterday to Kansas City and went to the Kansas City Farmers Market yesterday. I have not been around that many people in over a year, and it was a lot of fun, but we're probably ready to head back to the country again after we have to, I guess, work up to thousands upon thousands of people. But anyway, it is wonderful to join you all this afternoon, and especially here at Bass Pro Shops. So there might be a little bit of a repeat just in the themes that Justin mentioned, which I think we all know, that this last year has been so challenging in so many ways. The pandemic and civil unrest and many of the other challenges I think we can all name. And so just that anxiety and stress level, I think probably in many ways we're still kind of feeling it. It was a few months into the pandemic, I asked one of my foresters, how are you doing? You know, how are things going? And he said, you want the honest truth? I said, yeah. And he said, most of us foresters are introverts anyway, so you've just told us to go spend more time in the field, and you're laughing, you know it's true, more time in the field and less meetings. We're doing just fine. We're doing just fine. But, you know, there were also silver linings in how people responded in this time of turmoil and stress and everything else. So many responded by going outdoors. So many did around the country. In every state, talking with all of my colleagues, everyone saw this significant increase in people wanting to hunt, to fish, just to spend time outdoors. And we certainly saw that bump here, but so did our colleagues at state parks and in local county public areas as well. And I think it's because people, first of all, it was a place that people could go with their families or by themselves in a safe way, be socially distanced. But I do think, you know, we've done some research in asking first-time spring turkey hunters and then some of our first-time deer hunters or first time in a long time. And it was a safe place to be with family and friends, providing meat for the family because there was a lot of concern around just being able to provide for a period of time for families. But also this sense of healing. And this sense of kind of emotional, physical, a place of healing and kind of nurturing oneself. And we can't undervalue that nature, as we all know, or you wouldn't be here, we all know this intrinsic value of being outdoors that restores the soul and provides that place for, I think, mental, physical well-being. And we saw that in droves this last year. As some examples, I mean, you already know some of the statistics in Missouri. We already have over 1 million anglers. We already have close to 600,000 people that regularly hunt, 1.7 million wildlife viewers. But we do something called the Missouri Conservation Monitor. So on a quarterly basis, we are surveying, we use a company that does this, we are surveying hundreds of average Missouri citizens, whether they hunt or fish or anything else, just average Missouri citizens. And we ask them questions about conservation and about the department. And in the 2 monitor results ago, looking at the year of the pandemic, 80% 18% increase in Missouri residents who experience nature regularly. So that is an estimated 750,000 Missourians who said they participated more during 2020 than they had the year before. So that's a pretty darn significant increase in people saying that they regularly experienced nature. Justin mentioned it, but I want to tell you how proud I am of our team at the Missouri Department of Conservation during this time, really pivoting, and that includes not only our staff, but our volunteers, really pivoting to figure out how we can provide programs and services during that period of time. So Justin mentioned for a window of time we couldn't provide the in-person programs, but we did. I mean, our education staff, communications team, our private lands team as well, trying to pivot quickly to produce virtual programs. And what we saw was an explosion in attendance. I'm going to give you one example alone. One of our cooperators in private lands, we have cooperative positions with MFA, with Pheasants Quail Forever, with Turkey Federation and others, but just one program on pollinator plantings, and roughly 600 people virtually attended. A typical class like that maybe would have 50 in person. So even though I know change, Kenny, I'm looking a little bit at you, change is hard for all of us, right? It is. Change is hard. But the world is changing. And we either have to figure out how to adapt to that changing world, or we get left behind. And so 600 people now participating in one program, we have a reach we've never seen before. And there are some losses, and I understanding, what do we lose in that, but I want us to see the opportunities that exist too, of ways to connect and broaden the audiences using technology that we've not seen before. But for the pandemic, I'm not sure we would have transitioned that quickly. We had to transition, we did it, and we really saw a benefit as well. Justin did a great job of showing you the data, and even with the online program, you see the bump that, part of what we're doing with our volunteers is where do those in the spirit of relevancy and wanting to expand the audiences that hunt and fish and enjoy nature, where are those barriers? And that's really all of part of what you heard Justin talking about and what we're doing in other parts of the department of where are those barriers. But during this pandemic, our volunteers, including hunter ed and fishing classes, our stream team volunteers, of which of course there's thousands, nature center volunteers, master naturalists, you all hung in there with us during this last year, and I'm just incredibly grateful. Every year this agency benefits from hundreds of thousands of hours from volunteers. Hundreds of thousands of hours. We could not carry out the mission of the Department of Conservation without volunteers like you all. Couldn't do it. And it always reminds me, and I'm hearing, people who have been providing these services for 30-some, 40-some years, thank you. Thank you for that. It reminds me of how this agency was founded. It was not founded by bureaucrats. It was founded by the citizens themselves who care about conservation, who care about fish, forest, and wildlife, who care about the out-of-door traditions. This is your agency, and when I hear stories of here you are on a Sunday afternoon, sharing with one another, talking about the programs you have provided and will be providing, I come away with such a deep sense of gratitude. So thank you for that. In this spirit of change, pre-pandemic, what we were seeing as an agency is the military term of VUCA. That's, we're seeing change more rapidly and in a more volatile nature and a more chaotic nature than ever before. Technology is just an example of how quickly things are changing. Scott and I, a week ago, sitting around fireside last Saturday night, looking up at the western sky, and who's seen the SpaceX satellites? Anyone yet? Did that freak you out or what? I thought, this is it, honey. I love you. Goodbye to our families. But the SpaceX, the Elon Musk, satellites, about 60 of them, they look like just lit up reindeer going across in linear fashion across the sky, and we didn't know what they were. Like, holy cow. Woo! The world is changing faster than ever before, and so how do we hold on to everything that is near and dear? How do we ensure that future generations have fish, forest, and wildlife and habitat and programs to connect them to nature? How do we do that? And so part of the major reorganization that we had, that's really been underway within the department the last couple of years, fully implemented a year ago, July 1st, was in response to the fact that, we are seeing new wildlife diseases that we've never seen before. 20 years ago, we were sort of talking about chronic wasting disease, but we didn't have it here on the landscape. There were a host of other, we're seeing new diseases, pretty much on an annual and sometimes more rapid basis. We have a wildlife vet who's just saying, Sara, that they're coming faster. We're trying to respond and prepare for them, but the world is changing in that regard. Invasive species. Society is, we're already talking about this, how kids learn these days. 2 years ago, I would have had my little paper notes. I wouldn't have had an iPad. I mean, I'm trying to change, Stacy. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to change. But we just see these things changing, and so really our reorganization was all around how do we become much more responsive as an agency and ready to respond to these challenges, more adaptive in our approach. But it really, our new strategic plan, not so new anymore, but the new reorganization focused on goal number 1, taking care of nature, goal number 2, connecting people with nature, which is everything we're talking about here today. And goal number 3 is maintaining the public trust. We exist because of the citizens' will 80 plus years ago. And so much of what we are trying to do today is to make sure that we're still relevant as an agency and that we are maintaining the trust of the public that we serve. So part of this reorganization that I think you all would be interested in is a new relevancy branch, and by that, when you would talk to fish and wildlife directors across the country, when we get together, which we do at least twice a year and many more times on a regional basis, the biggest challenge, we talk about the natural resource challenges, but when we're talking about how do we ensure that people value fish, forest, and wildlife, they value nature in the future, we talk about this issue of relevancy. I had, bless my grandmother's heart, I had a grandmother who taught me how to hunt and taught me how to use firearms safely. Most kids these days don't have a granny like I did or family members like you did. Society is changing, so how do we ensure that relevance into the future? And so part of it for us is adding new capacity in the agency that really focuses on broadening the tent and increasing reach to new audiences, or perhaps connecting people who have been disconnected for some period of time. It'll include our R3 efforts. It'll also include a focus on recreational use engagement. And so we have 8 regions. We now have recreational use specialists that support each of those regions. And their focus is better understanding the constituency they serve in the particular region. So Kansas City region here, you've got a recreational use specialist. And her job is to better understand what those needs are of the citizens and members of the public in this area, and then how do we make those connections on our public lands, on our partnering lands as well, so that we have better engagement. And we have ways to either go through the schools or utilize new programs that bring new audiences in. Everything from some of the courses you all teach, but even our field-to-table events and other events where we're just trying to get people interested in engaging in the out of doors. And so we're excited about that new capacity as well. But it's all focused on ensuring that people value nature. Yes, we want people actually engaging and participating in the out of doors, but let's start with them having value and caring about the out of doors, and then move them to further engagement. You know, a couple of other exciting items that I know you guys are aware of, but we're certainly excited to be able to offer the hunters in Missouri new opportunities like the first elk season that we had last fall. It's kind of neat to come in as a director towards the end of that effort, but that restoration effort had long since been underway, years in the making. And I was delighted that of our 5 permitted elk hunters, all 5 were successful. I got a little nervous for our landowner. We had 4 general permits, and then one gentleman, Bill Clark, what a sweetheart he is. He's got to be late 70s. And he was our one landowner, so he was hunting on his own property. And so we knew the other 4 elk hunters had been successful. We were going, oh, come on, Bill, come on, Bill. So bless his heart, second to the last day of elk season, shot it off of his porch down in Shannon. Hey, it's so 5 for 5, and the commission had the opportunity to invite the successful elk hunters to a fireside chat a couple weeks ago, and 3 of them were able to attend, and just to hear their stories of how they scouted, I mean, weeks, months in advance, and the hunt itself, we got it on video, and it was just so inspirational to see this finally, years in the making, that we have this new opportunity. And so we're excited for elk season, year number 2 this fall, but also this fall, the first black bear season. And, you know, that's another one, a brand new opportunity. We're seeing an expanding black bear population. And so we'll have about 400 permits, but only 40 bears, so the quota will be at 40. So once we hit that quota, if we hit that quota, the season will shut down. But again, new opportunities, at least not in our lifetimes, that we're able to provide to our hunters here in Missouri, and that's been incredibly exciting. But more than anything, and I want to leave some time for questions, what I wanted to come here to say is thank you. Thank you for what you do to connect young people, to connect people to hunting, to shooting, to firearm safety. We could not accomplish our mission without you. And just to hear of the passion and the stories that I'm hearing, and to hear Tristan now, who I think will be a hunter the rest of his life because someone took the time to introduce him, and I'm so incredibly grateful for that. The other thing I want to leave you with is, you know, how do we keep this engagement going? As Stacy mentioned, I also, you know, I'm serving this year as president of the National Association, and we talk a lot about that. In fact, we're talking with our industry partners too, like Bass Pro Shops, who saw, I think most of you know, if you came here sometime a year ago, there were a lot of things off the shelves, right? There were a lot of camping equipment, kayaks. It was hard to find anything. And so we saw this increased engagement. So a lot of the discussion now is how do we keep this momentum going? Now, I know there's 2 sides to that, because I heard from some of my trout anglers at the trout parks, we don't like these newcomers here. Let's just be honest. You know, I'm used to standing shoulder to shoulder with people I've known for 10, 20, 30, 40 years, but a lot of these new people don't know the zone regulations. A lot of these new people, you know, it's different, and I don't like it. And we heard when we made the decision to keep the borders open for spring turkey hunters, a lot of our spring turkey, don't let those non-residents in. And so I ask us all, for people who care about and want to see these sports into the future, we want to see this hunting legacy lived out even more robustly in the future. We've got to be welcoming, and we've got to be patient. And we've even got to come alongside somebody who may be using the wrong lure in a fly zone and help educate, but be inclusive. It's all about including and broadening that tent. And so I really want to challenge all of us because you are the ombudsman and the ambassadors of our hunting sports that we love so much. Help the department in that regard. Help us figure out how to be more engaging, to be more inclusive, but to help some of our traditional hunters and anglers perhaps be more accepting of those who are coming on new and may not know everything just yet. But I think that's going to be a real challenge for us going forward, is how we welcome others into these sports that we love so much. I might also mention at the national level, there is something I want you all to be aware of. Fingers crossed, it might actually pass this year, called Recovering America's Wildlife Act. For many agencies, we are so blessed in this state with a 1/8 of 1 cent sales tax. What that does allow us to protect all species, not just game species. It does allow us to be more flexible and look at habitats and landscapes. But many state fish and wildlife agencies are incredibly limited in their funding and then how they can spend those finite funds. And Recovering America's Wildlife Act, it has been 20+ years in the making, really has. The legislation was called something different, but this effort to provide more flexible funding so that state fish and wildlife agencies can look at all wildlife and try to protect all wildlife and keep them off the Endangered Species Act, to keep common species common. So Recovering America's Wildlife Act, we think it has real hope in actually passing in the 117th Congress, perhaps even in the next 4 months. It would provide roughly $1.4 billion annually to state and territorial and tribal fish and wildlife agencies. And so a critical piece of funding for us. It's already been introduced in the House. It actually passed the House last year. We're really focusing now on leadership in the Senate to get this through. But it would help us do a lot of things. It would help us to provide more cost share to private landowners for conservation practices, more funding for educational programs, and more effort on focusing on our species of greatest conservation concern. So fingers crossed on that one. All right, team, I appreciate your time. Thank you.